Enrolling in an open-water scuba course is often the first step toward a lifelong dream, but for many prospective students, an asthma diagnosis feels like an immediate roadblock. The modern reality is that asthma is no longer an automatic ban from the water, though it does introduce significant biological caveats. Because asthma is not a monolith, your specific type and your unique triggers determine whether diving is a viable option for you. While dive shops often market certification as a breezy weekend activity, an asthmatic student must prepare for a far more rigorous evaluation. Having asthma doesn't disqualify you from the ocean, but it adds a strict, individualized biological tollgate to the standard recreational course. To understand the danger, we have to look at the physics of scuba diving. When you breathe compressed air at depth, that air expands inside your lungs as you ascend back to the surface.
The defining characteristic of asthma is the abnormal narrowing and constriction of your airways. This animated diagram shows a cross-section of a human lung next to a depth gauge. Watch what happens when a diver with constricted airways begins their ascent. The narrowed airways trap that expanding air inside the lungs. As the surrounding water pressure drops, the trapped air continues to expand, but it has no safe way to escape. The resulting structural failure causes severe lung overexpansion injuries. This includes pneumothorax, which is a collapsed lung, or an arterial gas embolism, where air bubbles are forced into your bloodstream. On top of that, experiencing an asthma attack underwater introduces immediate, severe panic. That accelerates breathlessness and makes managing an emergency almost impossible. A diving incident for an asthmatic involves catastrophic structural lung damage, a physical reality that far exceeds the sensation of being out of breath. Because the risks are physical, we have to look at how the real-world dive environment interacts with high-risk asthma profiles. This comparison matrix breaks down the stimuli that trigger attacks. We split these into high-risk profiles on the left and acceptable profiles on the right. First, if your asthma is exercise-induced, the path leads straight to a stop and reevaluate warning. Scuba diving often demands heavy, unexpected physical exertion, like kicking against a strong ocean current or swimming long distances on the surface. The next major disqualifier is cold-induced asthma, which also hits the stop warning. Even in the tropics, water temperatures drop significantly at depth, plus the compressed air you breathe straight from a scuba tank is extremely cold. The third disqualifier is emotionally triggered asthma. Adapting to the underwater environment involves inherent stress and anxiety, especially for beginners. If keeping your asthma in check relies on avoiding cold air, physical exertion, or stress, the inherent nature of scuba diving presents an unacceptable risk. Now, let's look at the acceptable profiles column. This covers prospective students who have mild, asymptomatic asthma. In diving medicine, well-controlled means you have consistently normal lung function and absolutely no recent episodes of wheezing, coughing, or chest tightness.
Even if you fit that description, you face a mandatory hurdle. You must pass a specialized assessment conducted by a doctor experienced in diving medicine. The doctor will use an onboarding checklist similar to this. They will run objective tests, starting with spirometry to measure lung function and peak flow monitoring to track your airway clearance. They will likely include an exercise challenge test. This uncovers hidden airway narrowing that might not be obvious while resting in an exam room. This assessment is an upfront investment of time and money that has to happen before you pay a dive shop for your first lesson. Objective, data-driven clearance of your lung mechanics is the only way to pass this biological tollgate. It does not matter how good you feel day to day. Once you have your medical clearance in hand, you have to manage the practical reality of being on the dive boat. For many asthmatics, a rescue inhaler is a critical safety crutch. But underwater, you face a hard environmental limitation. Pharmacological rescue medications cannot be administered through a scuba regulator. Your rescue inhaler must remain completely dry on the dive boat or back at the surface dive site. This demands strict pre-dive self-monitoring. A cleared diver has to voluntarily abort a dive if they have a minor respiratory infection or the slightest feeling of chest tightness that morning. You also have to practice transparent communication, ensuring your dive buddies and instructors are fully aware of your condition before anyone gets in the water. You trade the safety net of instant chemical relief for the absolute necessity of flawless preventative control and strict dive abort rules. We can bring all these variables together to weigh the physical risks against the recreational rewards of getting certified. This 2x2 quadrant chart maps an individual's asthma control on the y-axis against their trigger severity on the x-axis. A trigger-prone or poorly controlled asthmatic falls into this red zone in the bottom left. For individuals in this red zone, the high probability of an attack and a subsequent gas embolism makes diving highly unfavorable. Conversely, a mild, well-controlled asthmatic maps to this green zone in the top right, labeled the viable student zone. If your lung function tests are normal and your symptoms are rare, this profile represents a strong candidate for certification. Scuba diving relies entirely on uncompromised lung mechanics. The margin of error is exactly zero. If you find yourself in that green zone, you have a clear next step. Avoid spending hundreds of dollars on a dive course or specialized gear just yet. First, book an appointment with a physician specifically trained in diving medicine. Be completely honest with them about your medical history, especially regarding cold or exercise triggers. Many people with well-controlled asthma died safely and frequently all around the world. Securing objective, specialized medical clearance is the real entry ticket to the underwater world.